Welcome back to Tanya in 5. The last few days we have been studying chapter 5 of book 3 of Tanya, Iggeret HaTeshuva. In the previous chapter, we began to explain the difference between the relationship between God and the soul and God and all of creation. All of creation is created via the means of divine speech and words, that is, divine energy that is specifically tailored in a very limited kind of way and in a very external kind of fashion to match each particular creation. Whereas the soul emerges from the divine energy itself that is untainted by the words and packagings of creation. Now, the truth is, we also noted that when the soul descends into the body, it also has to go into the packaging of words, the words described in Torah, let us make man. Now, if that's the case, perhaps in its source, the soul comes from the pure, unadulterated, unchanged energy, but the way it is here, it lives like everything else and exists like everything else in this world with its defined parameters of creation. So explains the Alter Rebbe in chapter 5, but that's true, but not exactly true. You see, even when the soul descends into the body, it still retains the attachment it has to its original pure source, that is divine energy itself, unpackaged and unadulterated and unlimited and defined by creation. And here too we use the metaphor of speech versus breath. When I speak, even if there is a curtain in front of my face, someone behind the curtain can hear me. And the reason is because my speech emerges from me, but it's somewhat detached from me. But when I blow, that curtain prevents the breath from going to the other side. So it is that even as God projects and creates all of the universe through the fourth letter of God's name, that last letter, Hey, which we mentioned in the previous chapter, the power for divine projection. So God creates, and through that same medium, God projects the soul into this world. But the manner in which God projects the soul into the world is such that it retains a direct line to its source, the inner depth of the divine itself. Like the breath that must stay attached to its source, to the mouth, as opposed to speech, which can travel and go behind a curtain and can go through the medium of this phone and into your ears. Now, therefore, we can truly start to appreciate what a sin is. A sin is that curtain that separates between the divine source of the soul, the pure divine energy, and the soul as it's experienced in the body. The reason that a sin can create such a barrier is because sin itself is against the will of the very source. God himself does not want that sin. And therefore, that sin is against the will of the source that is projecting the soul into me, and thus creates this barrier. In fact, there are some sins that are so egregious that they cause such an intense barrier between the soul and the body and the source of the soul in the divine energy itself that in temple times the person would die as a result of that sin. Not as a punishment in the classic sense, retribution. You did something so terrible, you're going to get punished by death. No, natural consequence. If the person cut off his life force by doing such an egregious sin, naturally the person would die. Now, every sin is a little bit like that. They're not so egregious as to completely stop the divine energy, but it does cause a little bit of a rift in the connection. Using another example, the Alter Rebbe tells us to imagine it like a rope made of many strands. At the bottom of the rope, there is the soul and the body. At the top of the rope, there's the soul's source, the divine pure energy itself. And with every sin, one cuts a tiny little strand that connects him, his soul, to the soul's source, the pure divine energy. The takeaway from all of this is, we have to remember that mitzvahs and sins are not just a scorecard by which we behave better or worse, but these are actually the means by which we either connect to the source of life or detach from it. When we think of it this way, we have a much greater appreciation for when we're about to do a mitzvah, or God forbid, the opposite. Looking forward to seeing you when we conclude chapter 6.